Back, you're watching Your World on SABC News Channel 44. Now, COSATU spokesperson Sizwe Pamla and Isabel Fry, a director from the Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute, are still with me in studio, and we're having a discussion with regards to the budget speech by Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba that happened earlier today. National Treasury transformation, you speak of policy. Make us understand, speak to the layman and let us have an understanding of exactly what it means and what it entails when you say transformation of the National Treasury. Because if somebody says that, automatically you think finances, they're probably holding back on finances and red tape and things like that. Just take us through the policy structures and the difficulties in that process.
Well, look, our National Treasury has been really, for the last 2 decades, it has been addicted to neoliberal policies. And these neoliberal policies are the ones that have actually failed South Africans. Now, we're not having an honest conversation in this country because over the last couple of years, President Jacob Zuma, the state capture and all of that has sort of like muddied the waters. The fact of the matter is that these current economic challenges actually did not come yesterday, did not happen over the last 2 to 3 years. For the last 2 decades, we've been dealing with the economic policies of this country that have sidelined most of the poor people of this country, that have not really invested in South Africans as citizens. But what we have done to bend over backwards to say we're going to attract foreign direct investment as if it is the panacea to all of our problems. And at the same time, that is when transformation actually was sidelined, and we have not seen transformation. Now we have argued as COSATU to say, because these neoliberal hardliners at Treasury, they're like oil tanks, to turn them around will take time. So we have suggested, in fact, you'll remember last year, we were a very vocal supporters of Comrade Chris Malikane as the advisor to the minister, because what we were saying is to say, look, we need these progressive economic thinkers to also go to that treasury so that they can start to temper some of these hardline and conservative policies that have failed us. Now, we do not know where Comrade Chris Malikane is right now, but we watched with amazement how visceral the pushback was. I mean, as soon as he was appointed, there was a huge campaign to vilify him. And this is actually an economic professor from Wits University, but everybody started to really vilify him. But we understood, because these people have been in charge of that institution for so long, and they are not going to allow anyone to come in and say, look, these policies of the past failed us, now let us explore some alternatives. So we are continuing to make this call to the African National Congress to say, if you do not embark on a program of transforming that national treasury and rehabilitate it from its addictions to neoliberal policies, you are not really going to continue to count on the poor people of this country for support, because it can't be that the poor people are going to be used as the political football. We want the budget that is going to speak to the resolutions of the 54th conference, the resolutions of Mangung, and what the president promised us. So far, this budget has been very disappointing, and we think that the policies, actually, forget the allocation of funds, the policies that are being proposed are not really going to help us in any way to actually deal with the problems that face us.
Now, Isabel, budgets do change along the way as time goes by. Find that maybe an allocation of funds, so to speak, is revised and a new amount is brought in without any consultation or anything of the sort. Do you think this is likely to happen at a later stage going forward, just bearing in mind what Sizwe has said with regards to the transformation of Treasury and the policies that seem to be a major issue?
I think it's important to remember that members of parliament actually have the ability and the right to amend the budget, and that was something which was fought for quite a long time. In truth, that hasn't happened to any real degree, but we trust that when members of parliament go through the budget vote and the departmental votes, that they will bear in mind the concerns that are being raised, not just by us, but by many millions of people in South Africa. One of the interesting things that happened around Treasury last year was the announcement that there would be a greater role in the determining of the budget within the presidency. Now, this for us was quite an alarming announcement, because in essence not even looking at the substance of the budget. But there's a very clear process around the determination of the budget, which starts in June of a year. Departments put forward what their requirements are. There's a bit of horse trading, look at the kind of expected tax gain. And then in October, you have the medium-term budget policy statement, and then, of course, in February, the budget. Now, the absorption of some of that discretion into the presidency in a apparently quite untransparent manner sent shivers of alarm down many people's spines, because it seemed that the democratic participation in the budget process, both at NEDLAC and in other areas, was being closed down. And while we support the idea of extending free education at a tertiary level, I think it was quite unexpected to have the announcement coming from the former president so late in the budgeting process itself, because it meant that there was a knock-on effect in other line items within the Treasury and within the budget. I think just going back to one of the points that Sizwe raised was in terms of the past economic policies that have been, as he mentioned, extremely neoliberal. If you think back to GEAR in 1994, that was centered around the idea of redistribution. So growth through redistribution, understanding that you have to unlock the monopoly structure of some of our much of our economy, but also that people need to be able to be active agents of their own development. And then, of course, in 1996, that was replaced by GEAR, which had the central tenet of trickle-down economics, and also that redistribution would happen of the growth that occurred. So in effect, when you don't have growth, you don't have redistribution. And that's that's been one of the essences that has been, to our mind, just basically a brake on economic development in South Africa.
Now, what's the way forward? Let's speak about a way forward with regards to what would ideally you both like to see happening as COSATU and as SAPI in terms of the job summit is coming up. There's a lot of summits that are going to be taking place. There was reaction from some opposition parties stating the fact that there's summits and summits and summits that are planned, and which means there isn't really much of a plan going forward. What do you think is going to come from those summits, and are you going to be taking part as COSATU?
No, actually, we actually called for a job summit. So the job summit was a response to our call. Look, the problem with we support the job summit. In fact, we believe it will help us as a country because, look, we don't have a jobs plan. Yes. Let's look at the energy sector, for an example. So there was this push for renewable energy. And at the same time, people were saying we're going to shut down power stations. And when you shut down power stations, it means you shut down coal mines. But no one was explaining to us what was going to happen to the more than 5,000 workers who were going to be negatively affected. At the same time, we didn't get a sense as to where were these solar panels being manufactured and where they're going to come from. So we need to have a conversation around that. And you can also look at the mining sector. It has been hemorrhaging jobs at a very alarming rate. And we don't believe that all of those retrenchments were legitimate. So at the same time, you listen to the mining sector coming out of the Indaba, they are saying, look, we're following the Chilean and Canadian model of mechanization and automation, meaning that in actual fact, we are going to replace workers with the machines. So now we need to develop plans to respond to these developments, to this evolution, because of course we're not going to stop technology, but we have to have an appreciation of how the impact that the introduction of technology is going to have on the workers and the people of South Africa. And we have to agree that there has to be a managed way of introducing all of these issues, be it the issues of renewable energy or introducing automation. As we have seen with other retailers, already they are replacing workers with the machines. So we need to have that kind of a conversation. At the same time, we need to have a conversation that says, how do we kickstart the economy? Which sectors are going to grow going forward in the next 5 to 10 years? So that we can then agree to say the reskilling process. Because these workers, we can't just throw them into the unemployment line, the ones that are not skilled enough. We need to reskill them so that we prepare them for either them going out there earning a living by being business people, but or at the same time actually saying you need to develop some new skills so that you can be employable. So that kind of a conversation needs to happen in this country, because for so long we have had this crisis of unemployment. And even when unemployment was sitting at 27% in 2003, the economy was actually doing quite good. Yet we're not having jobs. So people are now chasing the numbers and saying, look, we want the economy to grow by this and that number. We are not excited by that, because we know that the economy can actually grow and it leaves people behind. So we want a conversation where we're going to have an economy that is going to be, we're going to all kickstart it, it is going to grow, but it is not going to leave most of us behind. That is the argument that we are having. On the issue of the budget, we are going to go back to Parliament and make submissions, as we normally do. And we do hope this time around they are actually going to take those submissions seriously, because honestly, we are going to have a very awkward relationship going forward, because we have been abused over the last 10 years, or at least over the last 24 years. So as workers, we are throwing a line in the sand this time around. We are going to take this issue seriously. If we are being left behind and we are not being taken seriously, we're going to have a very difficult relationship going forward.
Isabel, very quickly, unfortunately we have run out of time, but I just need your input as we wrap up.
Sure. I think the impact of reindustrialization is something we need to take seriously, because that's where you get far more decent jobs than in the informal sector and some of the services sectors. The other issue is a commitment from NEDLAC social partners that the comprehensive social security reforms that the negotiations that we're currently involved with will not have a 2-year deadlock like the national minimum wage, but that there's a commitment to see how we can use the kinds of policy tools that we have to look both at redistribution and to look at alleviating the poverty that prevents people from moving forward.
So the both of you, thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to getting an update once that job summit has taken place. And
the social sector summit.
Social sector, yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. And that was COSATU's spokesperson, Sizwe Pamla, and Isabel Fry, Director from the Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute, joining me live in studio and just taking an in-depth look at today's budget speech by Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba.